to the Plain Talk Podcast. I'm Rob Port. Later in the show, Congressman Kelly Armstrong joins me, as he does every week, to take your questions. Remember, you can submit questions for him anytime to rob@sayanythingblog.com. Also, we have, I put up social media threads on Facebook and Twitter, so if you follow me there, and I'm pretty easy to find, you could submit your questions that way as well. But remember, rob@sayanythingblog.com, you can submit those questions anytime. But before we get to Congressman Armstrong, a little bit of a rant about something that's going on in Washington, D.C. of late. The House, and as I record this, they haven't quite voted yet, but the House of Representatives is supposed to be voting on a resolution condemning bigotry and anti-Semitism, and at this point, it's not real clear what form that resolution is going to take, and it's all inspired, though, by Representative Ilhan Omar. She is a Democrat from one of Minnesota's congressional districts. She is one of the first female Muslim women elected to Congress, and she's been making comments about Israel and about Jews that many people, including myself, find offensive. You know, she's made comments alluding to the idea that Jews are in control of the world, and she's made comments about the idea that members of Congress are more beholden to Israel or more beholden to the Jewish lobby than they are perhaps their country. You probably don't need me to introduce these comments because they've been getting a lot of traction, and it's not really even my intent in this program to be critical of those comments. They are what they are, and they're offensive, and they're ugly, and I wish she hadn't said them, and I think they're worth condemning, and they're worth talking about, because she is a sitting member of Congress, and these are views that, given how controversial it is among the Democratic caucus in condemning Representative Ilhan Omar, I imagine that they're views that maybe aren't all that controversial among our friends on the left. Not that the left, in any sense of the term, has a monopoly on bigotry or hatred or comments of questionable taste, shall we say. Certainly, the right has its own issues as well, but what I wanted to talk about was more the question of how we are going to move as we move into an era where people of minorities are in positions of power, and we're moving past some of these historical power divides into a time where everybody's on a more equal footing. How we talk about issues like this. Now, what I'm talking about is obviously Representative Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib from Michigan, two Muslim women, sitting in Congress. Representative Keith Ellison, now currently the Attorney General of Minnesota, he was a Muslim. He served in Congress. Obviously, we have numerous people of African American ancestry who have served in Congress. We have Hispanic people, and in fact, just this week, a Native American woman presided over the United States House of Representatives for the first time. Now, my intent in pointing all this out is not to say that, we've moved beyond and racism's not a problem, and that, historically oppressed communities, for racial reasons or religious reasons or gender reasons or sexual orientation reasons, that sort of bigotry doesn't exist anymore. But as these people move into, as these groups move into positions of power, as we get that integration that I think we've all wanted, right? I mean, we've all wanted a sort of egalitarian society. We've all wanted a sort of meritocracy where, you could succeed and it doesn't matter what your gender is or your skin color is or et cetera, et cetera. That's what we've said we've all wanted. And I feel like we're getting there. I mean, as evidenced by all these firsts. We had our first African-American president. We're getting there. I'm not sure we're all that far removed from having our first female president. We're getting there. But as we get there, I think the dynamics of some of these questions about racism and struggle are going to have to change. Now, the reason why I think that's important to talk about in the context of Ilhan Omar is because I think there's been this assumption that people who are from minority groups, Muslim, African American, in this case, Representative Omar is both, people who are from those groups, it is assumed that they are always the victims and they cannot be the perpetrators of hatred or bigotry. And I just don't think that that's the case. I don't think it's ever been the case. I don't think it was the case. I think hatred has always been hatred. Bigotry has always been bigotry. If you hate somebody simply because of the color of their skin or their gender or their religion or what have you, if you hate somebody simply because of that, then that's bigotry. And it doesn't really matter what you are. I think we lose sight of that. I think some people are rushing to the defense and they're more willing to give Representative Omar latitude to say some of the things that she's saying, to frankly espouse some of the conspiracy theories that she's espousing. I think she gets a pass on some of it because she belongs to a group, right? Her demographics line up with groups that historically have been oppressed, historically have been victimized. Now, it's absolutely the truth that African Americans in this country historically have been victimized and are continue to be so to this day, much less so than in times past. But it continues. Women have been oppressed in our society in the past. Muslims have been oppressed in our society in the past. These are real things. These have happened, but none of them really have anything to do with what Representative Ilhan Omar thinks about Jews. I think this is important to talk about because I firmly believe that it's important to think about individuals and not groups. Now, I know that runs afoul of identity politics, which are so popular these days, particularly with our friends on the left. But the problem is if we think about groups, we run into problems like we do with Representative Omar, right? Because Representative Omar is, one of the first Muslim women elected to Congress. She has that stature. She has that sort of shield that she gets, and then she gets a pass from some, obviously not from everybody, because what she's saying is controversial, and there are plenty of people who disagree with her, including plenty of Democrats. But she gets a pass in a way because of who she is. And she gets that pass because of identity politics. She gets that pass because she belongs to a particular group. And my argument, my formulation, what I think the formulation on this sort of thing ought to be for everybody, is that it doesn't really matter what groups Representative Omar belongs to. She is an individual. She is responsible for the things she says. Her group, her demographics don't really matter one way or the other. Now, absolutely nobody should make judgments about Representative Omar based on her group. She shouldn't be dismissed simply because she's Muslim or a woman or African American. She shouldn't be treated that way because of her skin color at all. That would be bigotry. That would be misogyny. Whatever you want to call it. That would be ugly. That would be terrible. We shouldn't do that. But when it comes to her actions, she should absolutely be treated as an individual. She should be treated as an individual, judged by her merits, judged by her arguments, judged by her accomplishments, judged by, as Martin Luther King said, the content of her character. That's what she ought to be judged by, as an individual, both in good things and in bad. That's how we should look at the world, not as factions, not as groups, but as individuals. And yet that's what we do, and it's so much discord, right? This is an example, and I like to use this example a lot, but I because I'm a white male, and that's the lens through which I see the world, and it's not possible for me to see the world through another lens because I've never been a woman, I've never been African American, I've never been Hispanic, I've never been Jewish. I don't have these lived experiences. The only experience that I have is as a white male of Scandinavian, Northern European descent. That's the only life I've ever lived. And so when I go to an example about this, what I hear in the world, and I bring this up not to say that white males are victimized or anything like that, because we haven't. I fully recognize that white males throughout most of history have been at the top of the heap. But what I hear sometimes is I hear people be dismissive of white males, saying, oh, you couldn't possibly understand an issue because you're a white male, or white men are doing this, or white men are doing that, white men have privilege. And I'm thinking to myself, well, am I really to be judged by my skin color and my gender that way? I mean, not all white males had an easy life. Imagine for a minute you're a white male and you grew up in Appalachia, in an economically depressed area because the coal mine shut down. Your family didn't have jobs. Your mom and dad were addicted to opioids or meth. You grew up dirt poor. And you came out of that and you worked hard and you got an education and you got a good job. And then somebody later in your life tells you that you're privileged. Do you feel very privileged having come from a background like that, having scraped your way out of addiction and poverty? Do you feel privileged as an individual? Because that might be hard to believe. And it might breed some resentment that somebody makes an assumption about you, about your life, about your background, that you had it easy, that everything was just handed to you on a silver platter because of your skin color. Is that fair to that individual? Now, obviously, it's completely accurate to say, again, that white males have been on the top of the heap throughout history. But that's talking about a group. When you're talking about an individual, that individual has a real-life experience. They have a unique story. And the assumptions we make about the demographic group that person may belong to may not necessarily be fair to that person. And let's flip this around. Let's say we're now talking about a black male. And we make an assumption about a black male that person was born in an inner city and had a single mom and, had to dodge drug dealers on the way to school. And what if in reality that person was the son of a judge and grew up in a nice, Ohio suburb or something, and actually had a very nice middle-class upbringing. Now, that person's race is obviously, you can't sever that from their lived experience. They've lived life as an African American, and so they have that experience, and maybe they've even faced some racism because of that. Probably they have. That's an unfortunate reality in our society, but it's not fair to make assumptions about what their life was like. It's not fair to make assumptions about anybody because of their skin color. It's not fair to make assumptions about anybody because of their demographics, because you know what? They are individuals. We are all individuals. That is the worst thing, I think, about identity politics, is that we're talking endlessly about groups and we're not talking enough about individuals. We make assumptions about people because of their groups, and we really ought to be judging them about who they are. Representative Omar belongs to certain demographic groups, but Representative Omar is also an individual. And Representative Omar, based on the things that she said publicly, repeatedly, over time, a long pattern of comments, based on that, she has, I think, some pretty ugly feelings about Jewish people. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people on the left have some ugly feelings about Jewish people. So a lot of people on the right, too, frankly, while we're at it. And all of those people ought to be held individually accountable for those views. Representative Omar is individually accountable for how she feels about Jews. And the demographic groups that she belongs to simply do not matter. It doesn't matter that she's a Muslim. It doesn't matter that she's African American. It doesn't matter that she's a woman. She is an individual that holds bigoted views about Jews. Full stop. That's it, right there. Doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. Bigotry is not somehow worse or better or whatever, depending on the skin color of the person who holds that hatred in their heart. If you're a bigot against Jewish people, it doesn't matter if you're a white-bread Ku Klux Klan member from rural Georgia or Representative Ilhan Omar from a Somali community in Minnesota. It doesn't matter either way. Bigotry is bigotry. Hatred is hatred. And that's it. That's also it for today's rant. Congressman Kelly Armstrong, up next. This episode of the Plain Talk Podcast is brought to you by Energy of North Dakota. Oil and natural gas from North Dakota strengthens all of America. And through our abundance of talents, innovations, and technologies, energy responsibly produced here translates to worldwide economic stability. With producers and our communities working together, we're securing a sustainable future that generation after generation can build on. It's all happening right now with Energy of North Dakota. Learn more at energyofnorthdakota.com. Joining me now, as he does every week, is Congressman Kelly Armstrong. Remember, you can submit questions for his weekly appearances to rob@sayanythingblog.com. You can do that anytime. Or I put up social media posts on Twitter and Facebook under my accounts. If you want to go there and look at the questions and answer them, submit your questions there, and I'll ask Kelly, and we'll put them on the podcast, and you'll listen to them and everything's great. And Kelly, actually, in the Capitol, just came out of a meeting and kind enough to call on his cell phone and get this done for the week. Kelly, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you, Rob?
I'm doing very well. A lot of drama in Washington, D.C. over one of your colleagues, Representative Omar from Minnesota, our neighbors to the east. Democrats with this resolution, where are we at on that? That seems very fluid, but are they actually going to pass a resolution at this point?
I have no idea. I think we're voting on one today now. It's been like the clowns that couldn't shoot straight. There was one floating around yesterday, and then it got pulled back, and now I think we're going to actually have one on the floor today. I will tell you, I just came out of an oversight committee on opioid addiction and the crisis facing everything, so I haven't had time to look at it yet. But I think we can all agree that hopefully Rep. Omar's constituents will give her a sounding resolution in 2 years and vote her out of office.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, all this stuff, I'll admit to not being terribly interested in what Representative Omar says. I mean, obviously she's a congresswoman. I'm interested. It's newsworthy, but does it seem like we spend too much time on it? We're having Democrats condemning this and condemning that. I mean, you just said you came out of an oversight committee on the opioid epidemic. I mean, that's huge. That's a hugely consequential social ill that we're facing right now. There's a lot of public policy proposals on the table. There's a lot of things everybody's been talking about the government's doing. You come out of that, but the big news in Washington is, well, Representative Omar said this, Representative Omar said that. I don't want to dismiss or belittle or make it seem like the things that she said are unimportant, but I mean, at some point, the people in her district, like you said, elected her. It's kind of up to them. If they want, this is who they want representing them, then I guess that is what it is.
Well, and I agree with that, and we should condemn anti-Semitism. We should combat it all. But then what also immediately happens in this town, then it turns into whataboutism immediately, right? So if she said something which I think she shouldn't have said, I think it is anti-Semitic. I'll be clear about that. But then we talk about, well, what about this, what this person said, or what about what this person said? And I mean, I agree with you. You're dealing with the opioid addiction and oversight. And this is a huge public policy issue because it has federal components, it has state components, it has local components, and we have 70,000 overdose deaths last year. I'd way rather talk about that.
So tell us about that. Let's talk about that, because I think that's way more important than Representative Omar. What are you hearing out of this committee? I mean, what are you seeing in terms of progress on that front?
Well, what I tried to point out to the committee is, I mean, they want to make sure. This is a hard issue to deal with primarily because you have to have metrics for success. And the federal government has a problem here in that most of and it's not their fault, it's that most of your metrics are going to come from various states and various counties across the country, and there's really no uniform way of data collection. So your data coming out is only going to be as good as your data coming in. But what I really tried to stress is any federal programs and any federal resources that are available for something like this need to take into account that particularly in rural communities, the resources don't exist. So don't let perfect be the enemy of good, and make sure the people on the front lines of this fight, Rob, are local police chiefs, local chambers of commerce, local mayors, local governments. We got to make sure we get them the tools without too many restrictions where they can't actually utilize them.
So what sort of tools are we looking at getting them? I mean, we talk. Is it just funding? I mean, is that what we're looking at this point?
Yeah, there's granting, but I mean, just yesterday, Governor Burgum signed into law reduction of minimum mandatory sentencing on some drug-related crimes in North Dakota. You can't tell me that the momentum for that doesn't come directly from. I mean, some of the momentum from that, from what we've done over the last 6 years in the North Dakota legislature, but also coming from the First Step Act being passed. I mean, the federal government can drive the conversation, can ensure that we're doing this better, but yeah, also providing resources and grant money to communities to deal with these issues in the way they deal with them.
So what else has been going on? The last time we talked, Michael Cohen, you had just got done grilling him in the Oversight Committee. Do you still feel strong about that? I mean, we've heard some other things. Michael Cohen just announced today that he's suing President Trump for his legal fees. How's that been playing out?
Washington Journal just issued a report last night saying that Cohen lied about whether he ever asked for a pardon. I think outside of the pomp and circumstance of the Michael Cohen hearing, I don't think we learned anything all that new to anybody when we're talking about what he testified to or didn't testify to. I'm more interested, and we had a committee yesterday, and the GAO said that we're costing $23 million by not capturing natural gas in onshore drilling. So me and the GAO people had a little conversation about associated gas and how the fact that a 20% royalty on $3 MCF of gas is costing a 20% royalty on a $56 barrel of oil. So even like nonpartisan government accountability office, I don't think they understand how industry that's so important in North Dakota actually functions. So I mean, we're going to continue to talk, and you and I will talk week in and week out, and a lot of it will be partisan, and a lot of it will be whatever's getting the headlines. But I just want you to know that we have hearings that are going on that are actually important in North Dakota, and we're continuing to work in those issues as well.
Speaking about things that are important for North Dakota, earlier this week, the World Trade Organization gave a ruling on China manipulating its markets. Now, I know during the election cycle, that was a big issue. President Trump, talking about trade, Democrats hitting President Trump on trade and hitting Republicans for supporting President Trump on trade. North Dakota, we produce a lot of products that get shipped all over the world. Oil, agriculture products. The global trade is an important thing for our state economy. So obviously, the World Trade ruling is a win for North Dakota. But what other progress are we seeing on the trade front?
Yeah, it sounds, we actually I talked to Secretary Ross the other day, and I asked him about the 232 steel and aluminum tariffs. It was actually just yesterday. And he seems to think that we are making real progress. I'm not entirely sure that WTO order is actually a win. And the reason I say that is the last 13 times China's been hit by the WTO, they've just paid the fine and continue to move on. So I think that's part of the underlying problem, and that's why President Trump has taken the actions he's taken.
Do you feel like President Trump? Now, we just heard that the trade balance nationally has hit a record high, and I thought that this was kind of ironic. And I will be honest, I'm a critic sometimes of the way President Trump talks about trade. I don't think that trade deficits are as big a deal sometimes as he makes them out to be. But some of the national headlines reporting that our trade deficits have hit all-time high. And I think it's ironic because if you read in between the lines, part of the reason for that is that the Trump tax cuts have given Americans more money to spend, and in turn we're buying more stuff, some of which obviously is made overseas and is getting imported into the country. I don't know. I look at that, and that just sounds great. We got a strong economy. That means we can buy a lot of stuff, including stuff from other parts of the world. I mean, to me, that's a good. Are you worried about trade deficits?
Well, I mean, yes and no, but I agree. I mean, we're a commodity-based economy in North Dakota. We export our food, fuel, and energy. So, I mean, we need a global economy for all of those things. But I think the other part to this is there's more manufacturing jobs in the United States right now than there were 2 years ago as well. So this all feeds out. I mean, we have to admit, politics is politics. It is a little problematic for President Trump because he campaigned on bringing the trade deficit down, and as of yet, that's not happening. But I think you and I would also agree these types of economic reforms don't happen in 8 months or 6 months or 3 months. I mean, policies that are going to renegotiate or reevaluate how these things work in the international community take longer than that.
Do we put too much emphasis on things like the trade deficit? I mean, to me, I just want opportunity, right? I want Americans to be able to get jobs, be prosperous, live the sort of lives they want to live. And if we're accomplishing that, I kind of feel just let the chips fall where they may. I mean, if what makes me happy is buying a television, sold from that's made in China or Vietnam or wherever, what's the big deal?
Well, and we have consumer issues, right? We'll pay $900 for an iPhone, but we won't if we can get it for $860. I think when we start talking about, particularly in the technology area, trade deficits do matter, but maybe for reasons more along the lines of 5G and national security issues. And I think there is when we become more and more addicted to technology, I think there are some dangers involved in that if we're getting 100% of that technology from China. I mean, even if they're cheaper, it's an issue that we should at least be cognizant of and recognize that there are some actual potential threats there.
So what else do we have going on in Washington? What's coming up?
Well, this afternoon we have a subcommittee hearing on antitrust between the Sprint and T-Mobile merger, which we'll go sit in there and do that. And this weekend, I'm actually going to fly home tomorrow night. I'm not flying home. I'm flying home to Minot to watch my daughter play 2 days of a indoor soccer tournament, and then I'll fly back out to D.C. on Sunday.
So you'll be back in my neck of the woods up here in Minot. Well, Kelly, stay busy out there.
Can you keep the blizzard? Can you keep the blizzard a little south of there so I can get in and get out?
Yeah. Well, I'll use my weather control powers to make that happen. No. Listen, I don't even have that much say in my own household, let alone the weather, Kelly. I don't know what you're asking me to do. Thanks so much time for your time, as always.
Absolutely. Let me know if you need anything.
That's it for today's Plain Talk podcast. Hey, I have an announcement. I tell you at the end of all these episodes all the different places that you could find the Plain Talk podcast. One place that people have been requesting for a while is Stitcher, and I'm actually proud to announce today that you can now find Plain Talk in the Stitcher library. It's a popular podcasting platform. A lot of people like to use it. In fact, it's one of the most popular platforms out there, and now it features Plain Talk as well, so you can find the podcast there to download and listen to your heart's delight. We should be available on just about every platform out there. If you find one that Plain Talk isn't available on, just first of all, make sure it's not available there. If you search for Plain Talk with Rob Port, that should usually pick it up. But if for some reason you're having trouble, feel free to email me, rob@sayanythingblog.com. I am happy to help. Any other problems you're having with the podcast, any feedback on the show, any questions for our guests, email all of that once again, rob@sayanythingblog.com. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again.